Hi, daily fourth graders. In this lesson, we are going to be representing and counting hundredths. It's math lesson 6.4. First, before we get started, you need to have a piece of paper and a pencil out, or you need to have your whiteboard and whiteboard marker out in front of you. All right, you guys. So first thing, I want you to imagine a meter. If you remember back in Module 2, we discussed metric units. So we talked about centimeters and meters. We talked about grams and kilograms. But we're going to focus on a meter right now. I want you to think about a meter, visualize it in your head. And then my question to you is, how many centimeters are in a meter? How many centimeters were in a meter? You're right, there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So, what fraction of a meter is 1 centimeter? What fraction of a meter is 1 centimeter? Well, if there's 100 centimeters in a meter, then 1 centimeter would be 1/100th, right? So, knowing that, my friends, I want us to look at this tape diagram, and I actually would like for you to draw one yourself. So this tape diagram, I have a tape diagram that represents 1 meter, which we know is 100 centimeters, right? And you'll see that my tape diagram is split into 10 parts. If we remember correctly, again, 1 centimeter, and I'm just going to write at the top here just so we kind of have a little key. We know 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. We can also write that as a decimal. 1/100th, if you remember from our inquiry, we write hundredths like this. All right, I know there's kind of a lot of stuff going on here, but hopefully you can see it okay. So 1/100th meters written as a fraction and written as a decimal, these are equivalent. These have the same value. In 1/100th meters right here written as our decimal, we don't have any tenths, but we have 100th. All right, and if we continued with our place values, we would have tenths, hundredths, it would go then to thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, and it would continue from there. It's pretty crazy. Okay, you guys, so again, we know that 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. Here in this tape diagram, we have 1 meter, all right, which is the same as 100 centimeters. So, if I were to shade this part of our tape diagram, what fraction could we write to represent this? I'm going to give you a clue. There's actually 2 fractions we could write. There's actually a lot more, but for right now, there's 2 major fractions that I want you to write. So if we look at this tape diagram, again, we have it split up into 10 parts. So what would this fraction be? You're right, it would be 1/10. So we know that this is 1/10 because we have 1 part shaded out of 10, but we also know that this meter is also equivalent to 100 centimeters. So if this whole thing is 100 centimeters and there's 10 parts, what would this value be? You're right, it would be 10 centimeters, right? Because the whole thing is 100 and it's split into 10 parts. So 100 divided by 10 is 10. So what other fraction could we write? This is 1/10, but it's also 10 what? You're right, it's also 10 hundredths. These fractions are equivalent. These have the same value. If you guys remember from our Module 5 lessons, we can actually check to see that these are equivalent using multiplication. If you multiplied 1/10 times 10 over 10, what would you get? You'd get 10 hundredths. So we know from our last module that these are equivalent. But now we can also see it because we have 1/10 of a meter, but we also have 10 100ths centimeters. Alrighty. So Now I'm going to shade in a little bit more of our tape diagram, and let's see, what new values we have. So we have one box shaded in. I'm going to shade in another one. And then, you guys, I'm actually only going to shade in half of this one. Half of this one. Okay. So what's our new value? We had one part shaded here, another part, and then half of one. What fraction could we write to represent this? I want you to pause the video and I want you to think about it. What new fraction could we write to represent the new shaded portion of the tape diagram? Alrighty, so hopefully you paused the video and thought about it for yourself. We have 1/10, 2/10, and then we only have half of a tenth shaded here. And we can't write 1/2 tenth, that's not really how it works. So let's try using the hundredths. So we have 10 hundredths, 20 hundredths, and then half of 10 hundredths would be 5 hundredths. So 10 plus 10 plus 5 would give us 25 hundredths. That's our new fraction. Beautiful. I would like for you to rewrite 25 hundredths as a decimal. How can we rewrite 25 hundredths as a decimal? Well, we know that, 1 hundredth looks like this. If we count up to 2 hundredths, 3 hundredths, all the way up to 10 hundredths, we know that this place value would become a 1 and this would be a 0, right, for 10 hundredths. And then it would keep going up and up like that. So we know 25 hundredths will look like this. 25 hundredths. The place value that we use, that we say for this decimal, is hundredths because the last number ends in the hundredths place. So that's why we say 25 hundredths and not, we don't call it by tenths because we have hundredths. We have number in the hundredths place. So we read this as 25 hundredths. All right, you guys. So real quick, I'm going to erase my board because there's one other thing that I want us to do before you practice on your own. So 25 hundredths, I'm going to rewrite my decimal. 25 hundredths, if we wanted to kind of break this apart again and, represent it as a fraction, it's pretty simple too. We know we can write 25 over 100 like we just did. But I want you to think about it in terms of place value. So this 2 is in the tenths place. So how many tenths do we have? You're right, we have 2 tenths. It was not a trick question. Also not a trick question, how many hundredths do we have? Yeah, we have 5 hundredths. Breaking this decimal up is really, really useful when you want to draw a tape diagram, which is what you guys are going to do when you practice. So in a moment, you guys, I'm going to give you 2 decimals to practice with. You're going to, I'm going to give it to you as a decimal. I want you to split it up into its tenths and hundredths, and that's really going to help you to draw a tape diagram, right? We could split it into 10 parts. I think that's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We know 2 tenths, we just shade in these 2, like we did. And then 5 hundredths, we also know that these each are worth 10 hundredths. So we could split it in half and say that's 5. So this really helps you to represent it as a visual model. I also want you to write it as a fraction, which we know this would be 25 hundredths. All right, you guys. So today you learned how to write and represent hundredths, show them as a decimal, using numbers, using fractions, using a visual model. And you guys are going to practice with 2 different decimals. I'm going to give them to you right now. Your practice problems, you are going to decompose 28 hundredths and draw a tape diagram, and then you are going to decompose 79 hundredths and then draw a tape diagram. All right, you guys, so feel free to rewatch any parts of the video if you need a reminder. Thanks for tuning in, and drop a question down below if you have any. All right, see you guys next time.